My name is Emily Carter. I'm 37, an accountant. 6 weeks ago, I stood in the doorway of my mother's retirement party, a party I had quietly paid the deposit on, and listened to relatives call me the cold daughter who never helps. 20 minutes later, my sister snapped her fingers at a security guard and said it loud enough for the whole ballroom to hear, "Get her out of here. She's upsetting people." My mother was standing 10 feet away. She looked at the centerpiece instead of me. I drove home. I didn't cry, and I didn't scream. I sat down at my kitchen table and did one thing that took less than 15 minutes. By the time I got out of the shower, I had 53 missed calls, and my mother and sister were standing on my porch in their party dresses, still holding their heels in their hands. They thought I'd sent them a declaration of war. I hadn't. I'd sent them a bill. What happened over the next 2 months, the unpaid vendors, the paperwork my sister never wanted anyone to find, and the offer my mother made me on my own doorstep is the part nobody in that ballroom saw coming. If you've ever been the one who did everything and got credit for nothing, stay with me. This one's for you. The invitation showed up in the family group chat, the same thread where my cousins argue about who's bringing the deviled eggs. Celebrating Diane's retirement. The Wentworth Room, Oak Ridge Country Club. 7 p.m. Hosted by Jessica. Hosted by Jessica. I read that twice, because back in May, my sister had called me with her honey-sweet voice on. The club wanted a deposit to hold the date, $4,000. Just put it on your card, Em, I'll pay you back the second a few invoices clear. I know exactly what it means when somebody's invoices never clear. But it was Mom's night, 32 years running the front office at Lincoln Elementary. So I paid it the way I'd paid for everything for 6 years. Quietly, no announcement. Nobody ever brought it up again. It just sat on my statement like a guest nobody had introduced me to. The night of the party, I wore the navy dress I saved for client dinners and wrapped 2 gifts, a photo album I'd spent a month assembling, and a check tucked into a card for the pottery classes Mom had talked about for 20 years and never once signed up for. The parking lot looked awfully full for a school secretary's retirement. The Wentworth Room didn't look like a retirement party. It looked like a wedding that had misplaced its groom. A wall of white roses at the entrance, a photo booth spelling out "Cheers to Diane" in gold script, a 4-piece jazz band in the corner. I counted at least 100 guests, strange, since my mother's actual circle numbered about 30. The rest were faces from Jessica's World event clients, club acquaintances, women in beige cocktail dresses murmuring "so lovely" to no one in particular. In the middle of it all was my sister, clipboard in hand, directing a photographer like a field general. "Get Mom under the arch." No, laughing. My mother stood beneath the floral arch in a champagne-colored dress I'd never seen, and she was radiant, happier than she'd looked since my father died. Some part of me was glad, even standing there invisible in my navy dress. But the accountant in me was running numbers. Flowers like that don't come cheap, and neither does a live band or a hired photographer. I was standing inside a 5-figure evening for a woman whose pension I could recite from memory, and I wasn't in a single photograph. Nobody had saved me a seat at the family table. I set my 2 gifts down between an orchid and a basket wrapped in cellophane, and asked myself the question I should have asked back in May: who, exactly, is paying for all of this? I found out by the punch bowl, from 2 of my mother's cousins who didn't realize I was close enough to hear. "There's the Ice Queen," one of them said, tilting her head toward me like she was commenting on the weather. "Never lifts a finger for Diane. Thank God for Jessica." The other one made a small sound of agreement, the hum women make in church. I stood there holding a glass cup of punch, and the strange thing is, I didn't feel wounded. I felt like I was reading a bank statement with a stranger's name typed where mine should be. Never lifts a finger. I had replaced the roof over my mother's head 3 years earlier, $8,000, after a storm tore through the shingles. But what stopped my breath was how smooth the sentence sounded. Nobody delivers a line that polished on the first try. Somebody writes it, and it gets repeated at every holiday like a family recipe, passed hand to hand until a woman can say it over punch without checking who's listening. I looked across the room at my sister, laughing under the arch with her arm looped through our mother's, both turning toward the camera on cue. For the first time in 6 years, I stopped asking why everyone believed it, and started asking who had been telling it. So I did the simplest thing I could think of. I decided to hug my mother. I crossed the floor while the band eased into something slow, and I made it within 10 feet of the arch before Jessica stepped directly into my path, smile fixed, eyes not matching it. "You're not going to make this weird, are you?" I told her I'd just come to say congratulations. That was it. I watched her run the calculation, photographer to her left, beige dresses to her right, 100 witnesses waiting to see what she'd do. She turned toward a grey-jacketed man by the wall, lifted her hand, and raised her voice to carry across the room. "Security. Get her out of here. She's upsetting people." The band kept playing, but every conversation around us went still, like water settling after a stone drops in. The guard, somebody's nephew, judging by the earpiece, came over looking mortified. Here's the detail I've held on to every day since. My mother was standing 10 feet away. She heard every word. And she turned her face toward the flower wall and studied the roses like they'd asked her a question. She never said my name. I set the album and the card down on the gift table, smoothed the ribbon flat, and said, "Enjoy the party, Mom," to nobody in particular, in a voice that didn't shake. Then I walked past the photo booth, past the gold letters, and out into the parking lot. Nobody followed me. I sat in my car and did not cry, which is exactly what the room expected, the Ice Queen, frigid even in her own front seat. But here's what actually happens inside me when the ground shifts. I count. 6 years of property taxes, homeowner's insurance, the Medicare supplement, the car payment Mom assumed Dad's pension still covered, utilities in the lean months, the roof $8,000, and my father's final hospital bills, $19,000, paid off in 14 quiet installments so she'd never see a collection notice with his name on it. Call it $15,000 a year, 6 years running. The total assembled itself the way it does on a clean spreadsheet, undeniable. And underneath it, a small truth I'd been avoiding for years. I had been paying, every month, for the privilege of being invisible. Never lifts a finger. The words didn't sting anymore. They itemized. I drove home under the speed limit, calm as a Sunday morning. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to do something far quieter than that. My kitchen table has been my real office for years. At 8:40 that night, it became a courtroom, a ledger, and an exit all at once. I opened my laptop, and my dog, Murphy, settled across my feet the way he does when I'm working late. I addressed one email to the family group thread, all 29 relatives who just watched me get walked out of a ballroom by security, with my mother and sister sit at the top. No greeting. Effective tonight, I am stepping down as Mom's unofficial financial manager, a role I've held since Dad passed 6 years ago. All automatic payments from my accounts, property tax, homeowner's insurance, the Medicare supplement, the car lease, utilities, will end at the close of this billing cycle. A one-page summary of the last 6 years is attached for the family's records. The $4,000 deposit for tonight's event is currently on my credit card. The venue contract itself is in Jessica's name. Going forward, please direct all financial matters to Mom and Jessica, who I understand have everything handled. Emily. The attachment was 1 page, because the truth usually is. Line items. Dates. The roof. The hospital debt. A total at the bottom, $116,000. No adjectives anywhere on the page. Adjectives are my sister's specialty. I use numbers, and numbers don't need a microphone. I read it twice, not to soften it, but to check the math. The math had been right for 6 years, sitting quietly in the dark with me. I clicked send at 8:41, closed the laptop, and went to take a shower like a woman with absolutely nothing left on her calendar, which, for the first time in 6 years, I was. When I came back out, my phone was lit up like a slot machine that had finally paid out. 53 missed calls. Jessica 16 times, Mom 11, my Aunt Carol 9, cousins I hadn't spoken to since my father's funeral, including, notably, the woman from the punch bowl. Jessica's first voicemail was a small masterpiece, honey and panic braided together. Hey, I think your account got hacked, call me. We can fix the wording. People are reading this. Mom is really upset. 20 minutes earlier that same voice had shouted get her out of here across a ballroom. Funny what 1 page of arithmetic does to a person's tone. Buried under the noise was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Oak Ridge Country Club events line, trying to reach Jessica Reyes regarding tonight's outstanding balance. Your card is on file for the deposit. Please advise. Outstanding balance. I stood in my kitchen, hair still damp, and felt something cold settle under my ribs. The party hadn't been paid for at all. Headlights swept across my window at 10:15. Apparently that's exactly how long dignity lasts once a crisis breaks. Jessica in her hostess gown, phone glowing in her fist like a jammed weapon. Behind her, my mother, corsage still pinned to her dress from 7 hours earlier. Jessica knocked the way process servers knock. Emily. Open the door. Murphy gave one low woof and looked up for instructions. I stood there a second, absorbing a sight I'd never seen in 6 years of quietly keeping that family afloat. They had come to me not for money, but for something only I could give back, my silence. I tightened my robe and opened the door. Jessica walked in already talking, the way she enters every room in her life. Okay. Here's what's going to happen. You send a follow-up saying the numbers were a rough draft, that emotions were high tonight. No, I said. Just that. I watched her recalibrate, the way a GPS reroutes after a missed exit. Sweetness first, M. We're sisters. Tonight got out of hand, that whole security thing was a misunderstanding, you know how parties get. When that didn't land, the Rivalry gear showed itself. Everyone's going to think you've lost it. Airing family business to the whole thread. People will think you're unstable. My mother, meanwhile, stood on my doormat and delivered one line, over and over. People saw that email, Emily. Not is it true? Not did you really carry me for 6 years? Not why didn't I know about the roof? Just, people saw. I looked at my mother for a long moment and finally understood the house I grew up in. It had never been about what was actually happening. It had only ever been about what could be seen from the street. Every number in that email is accurate, I said, in the same even voice I use when a client's books don't survive daylight. If either of you finds one line that's wrong, I'll correct it to the whole thread by morning. Silence. My mother studied her shoes. My sister's jaw worked, but she had nothing because everyone on that email chain already knew the math was right. It's late, I said gently, and closed the door on the 2 best-dressed women in the state. Through the wood, I heard my sister's heels turn on the porch boards, and one muffled sentence meant for someone other than me. She'll cave by Tuesday. She wouldn't. To explain how I earned a nickname like the Ice Queen, I have to go back 6 years, to a cardiac ward and the funeral after. My father, Robert, was the warmest man in any room, and the only one in my family who ever watched me work. When his heart gave out, my mother folded, which nobody blamed her for. My sister grieved the way she does everything visibly, beautifully, surrounded by a rotating audience of comforters. Somebody had to be the third kind of person. I was the one comparing casket prices with numb hands, cancelling his cards, calling the pension office, sitting my mother down at the bank the first time her name had to stand alone on an account in 40 years. At the service, relatives lined up to hug Jessica like a receiving line, while I confirmed the lunch headcount at the guest book. Jessica weeping by the casket, Emily dry-eyed at the sign-in table. That's the picture everyone kept. What the picture didn't show was the parking lot afterward, where I sat with the engine running and cried until my ribs ached, alone, before wiping my face and going back to work. I've never grieved for an audience. An audience only writes down what it can see. 2 weeks after we buried him, I sat at my mother's kitchen table and opened a drawer she'd been avoiding, weeks of unopened envelopes. A modest pension. A mortgage almost, but not quite, paid off. $19,000 in hospital bills addressed to a dead man. My mother sat across from me, hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, unable to meet my eyes. I said, "Mom, let's get everyone together, you, me, Jessica, and make a plan as a family." She grabbed my wrist. "Please don't tell anyone. Your father would be ashamed if people knew he left me like this. What do you do with that? Expose your grieving mother, or protect the one thing she had left, appearances?" So I built a quiet machine. Everything paid straight to the source, the county, the insurer, the contractor. Never cash through anyone's hands. My name kept off her debts. Records kept the way any accountant keeps records. I'd asked for daylight and been begged into the dark, and I said yes. If you'd been sitting at that table, you'd have said yes too. The machine ran so quietly the whole family eventually forgot anyone was running it at all or decided somebody else must be. The whisper by the punch bowl had an origin story. 2 years earlier, Jessica had walked into my office with a folder and a dream, $60,000 to launch a premium event planning studio, and she needed a cosigner. I read her numbers the way I read any client's 2 years of losses, projections that assumed her follow account would triple and start paying invoices on its own. As her sister, I wanted to believe her. As an accountant, that loan would have been a slow-motion collision. So I said no, kindly, with 3 cheaper alternatives printed out. She smiled, thanked me, hugged me at the door, and, according to my aunt, went home and started rewriting the family record. A seed of truth, watered with performance, grows into an entire field of fiction. I'd refused exactly one thing. By the time that sentence reached a punch bowl 6 years later, it had grown into never lifts a finger, spoken over a party sitting on my own credit card. My sister hadn't just spent money she didn't have. She'd spent my name. The Saturday after the party, I did the thing I'm actually proudest of in this entire story, and it involved no revenge whatsoever. I bought a navy 3-ring binder, a pack of dividers, and sheet protectors, and I spent 3 hours at my kitchen table building my mother's financial life into something she could hold in her own hands. Tab 1, Property Tax, Account Number, County Website, Screenshots, Due Date circled in red. Tab 2, Homeowners Insurance, Agent's Direct Line. Tab 3, the Medicare Supplement, What it costs, What happens if it lapses. Tab 4, the car lease. Tab 5, Utilities, with the budget billing option highlighted. A contact sheet at the back, every number a 65-year-old widow might need. No commentary anywhere. No line that said this is what I carried while everyone called me useless. The numbers could say that without my help. On the very last page, I placed a business card for a licensed professional fiduciary, someone whose entire job is managing money for older adults, bonded and regulated. The healthy version of everything I'd been doing alone in the dark for 6 years. I drove to my mother's house while she was at church, left the binder on the porch bench, and texted her, "Everything you need is in the binder. Tax bill is due October 31st. Then I drove home. I'd like to say it felt like freedom. It felt more like handing over a child I'd raised, except now she was on the bench, not in my dark. My Aunt Carol showed up Monday with a container of lemon bars and the energy of a woman who'd been waiting years to testify. She sat at my table and drew me the whole map every holiday, every gathering, Jessica quietly working the room. A sigh here. I just wish Emily helped more with Mom. A brave little smile there. Somebody has to be there for her. The genius of it, Carol said, was that I was never in the room to contradict it, and when I was there, I was quiet. You left the stage empty, sweetheart. Your sister never met an empty stage she didn't fill. I asked why nobody ever told me. Carol looked at her hands. Because I half believed it. That's the ugly part. There it was, laid out on my table between the lemon bars. In my family, the truth belonged to whoever told it first. For 6 years, my sister told it first, and I assumed the work would eventually speak for itself. Work doesn't speak. Work just works, silently, until somebody decides to notice or doesn't. By Wednesday, the country club called my office. A weary events manager had spent 3 days playing phone tag with my sister. We're holding an outstanding balance of $9,200 on the Wentworth Room event. Your card is the one we have on file. There it was, the glittering 5-figure evening, itemized at last. None of it paid. All of it drifting quietly toward the only card in the building that had ever cleared. My card authorized a $4,000 deposit in May, I told her. The signed event contract is in Jessica's name. I'll follow up in writing revoking any further authorization. I could hear her typing. That's very clear, thank you, she said, in the tone of someone closing a file labeled problem. By Friday, my aunt reported the florist was calling my sister's voicemail on repeat, and the photographer had started asking around. In my sister's world, that's not a billing issue, that's a house fire. I had just very politely declined to be the fire department. The story of the unpaid ballroom made its rounds without a single push from me, and that part matters. I never posted anything. I sent one email to one thread and let the ordinary physics of vendor gossip do the rest. A bride who'd booked my sister for a spring wedding called asking about deposit refunds. The photographer stopped tagging her online. My sister's entire brand ran on one fuel, the appearance that everything was handled. It turns out appearances have creditors too. Then my brother-in-law called. Mark had spent 10 years married to the performance without ever checking the ticket price. Whatever's going on with Jess's books, is it bad? I felt pity, aimed in every direction at once. He wasn't calling to defend her, he'd seen the club's number on her silenced phone and was doing what everyone in this family does, coming to the accountant privately, in the dark. 2 years ago she asked me to co-sign $60,000 for the studio, I told him. I read her numbers and said no. A long pause. She said you refused because you were jealous, he said quietly. I know, I said. Ask her the rest yourself. 2 weeks after the party, my mother left me a voicemail unlike any of the 53 calls from that first terrible night. No people saw. No defense of my sister. Her voice was small and flat, the way it sounded the year my father died. The binder's on my kitchen table, she said. I've been reading it every night this week. I'm 65 years old, and I have never once paid the property tax myself in my life. Your father did it, and then I suppose I just told myself it was handling itself. A long pause. Did you really do all of this, all these years? Don't answer that, I know you did. It's all in your handwriting. Another pause. Call me back when you're ready. Not before. I'm learning tab 5. The budget billing. I stood by the counter and played it 3 times, and Murphy leaned against my shin. I'm not going to pretend my eyes stayed dry, because the whole Ice Queen thing was always a lie. Here's what I did not do. I did not grab my keys. 6 years ago, a message that sad would have had me on her doorstep in 12 minutes with my checkbook. The old version of me answered need like a fire alarm. This time, I finished my tea, and I let her sit with tab 5 because rescue had been the family's drug of choice, and I was done supplying it. 2 days later, something worse than I'd imagined landed in my mother's kitchen, and it had nothing to do with property tax. I sat at my mother's kitchen table for the first time since the party, and the navy binder sat between us like a third guest, covered in little yellow sticky notes in her own handwriting. She'd made coffee in the good cups. Then she folded her hands and delivered the sentence she'd clearly rehearsed. Families help each other, Emily. I just don't understand why you needed credit for it. Credit. I looked at this woman I love and finally saw the architecture of her world. In it, there were only 2 currencies, help, which appeared like weather, and credit, which vain people demanded. For decades married to a man who handled every bill, she had genuinely never seen the machinery of her own life turning. I didn't argue. Instead I asked, gently, Mom, what do you think the property tax on this house runs per year? Just guess. She smoothed the tablecloth. I don't know, a few hundred. I let that sit in the air, then turned tab 1 toward her. 4,000 a year, 6 Octobers running. She looked at the page for a long time, and what crossed her face wasn't surprise, it was the realization that she could have known this any year she wanted to, and some part of her had quietly voted not to. We were on tab 3 when the front door opened without a knock, and Jessica walked in carrying a leather folder and the smell of expensive perfume and panic. Word had traveled, the way it always does in families that can't hold water. She didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table like a podium. Mom, you can't just accept her numbers, she's an accountant, they make paper say anything. The roof wasn't 8,000. She's punishing us. Notice the shape of it, not one specific error, just an aroma of error. Pick a line, I said evenly. I'll pull the receipt right now. She didn't pick one, because there wasn't one to pick. She pivoted to the softer weapon instead, eyes glossing on Q, kneeling by our mother's chair. I planned that whole party for you. And she turned it into this. I watched my mother waver, her hand drifting to Jessica's hair, her eyes finding mine with an expression that said, can't you just be the bigger person, which in our family has only ever meant the quieter one. Something in me went very calm. I wasn't going to win a storytelling contest against my sister. I never had. So for the first time in my life, I stopped entering. As I rinsed my cup at the sink, Jessica's folder slipped open an inch on the counter. Enough to see a bank logo on the papers inside. My aunt called the next morning with news that emptied my lungs. That folder was a home equity application. Jessica had driven our mother to a broker friend, and the plan was already typed up, an $85,000 line of credit against the house on Miller Street. The pitch was a word salad of consolidate and just temporary, and the appraiser can come Thursday. The house my father had paid down inch by inch for 34 years. The last clean asset my mother had left. What I felt wasn't rage is for surprises, and this wasn't one. My sister wasn't a monster. She was drowning quietly, expensively, the way people drown when the performance is the only asset they own. And drowning people grab whatever floats. That evening I drove to my mother's and made myself one rule that turned out to be the whole revolution: say it once. She was at the kitchen table, the binder on one side, the bank folder on the other. I put my hand flat on the folder. This turns your house into Jessica's oxygen tank, and she's drowning. If you sign it, I love you, and I won't manage the wreckage afterward. All I'm asking is one meeting with a real fiduciary before you sign anything. She works for you, not me, not Jessica. You. My mother's chin lifted, 40 years of reflex kicking in. Your sister's just going through a rough patch. Why do you always have to be so cold? The family's oldest weapon, the one that used to send me scrambling to prove otherwise. This time I let it sit there. I hope she gets through it, I said. Read tab 1 again before Thursday. I kissed her cheek and walked out of the house I'd quietly held up for 6 years, and didn't look back. October 31st landed on a Friday, and I spent the day feeling a phantom limb, the tax deadline, red circled on tab 1, no longer mine to carry. My hands still knew the county website by heart. I didn't touch it. At 9 that night, my phone buzzed. A blurry photo, a county receipt marked paid, and beside it, my mother's checkbook, open, the payment logged in slanted handwriting I hadn't seen sign anything financial in 6 years. One line underneath, the binder told me how. I found out later she'd cancelled a kitchen remodel to cover it. 65 years old, and she just made her first quiet, independent payment in decades. The bank folder was still on Miller Street, though, with an appraiser scheduled for Thursday. 2 weeks later, the dominoes fell and I didn't push a single one. Mark finally asked his wife the real question and got the real answer: nearly $70,000 in stacked debt, a studio lease 3 months behind. Not a crime, just a performance financed at 29%. My mother sat with that folder for a long time. Then she got up, didn't sign it and didn't burn it, she put it in the same drawer where she'd once hidden my father's unopened hospital bills. Then she called the broker and cancelled Thursday's appointment. On a Friday evening in late November, my mother's car pulled into my driveway, alone, unannounced. She hadn't been inside my house in years. I made coffee in the good cups, because apparently I am my mother's daughter whether either of us likes it. I was wrong, Emily, she said. I've sat with that binder for 2 months, and every page of it is you. I let the whole family believe you did nothing. My throat closed. 37 years old, and one sentence from my mother could still do that. She reached across the table and took my hand. Come back. Take it over again. I trust you. For 2 seconds, the room was perfect. Then came the rest, soft as a napkin folded over a knife. But the money part stays between us. Take that summary down. Tell everyone it got exaggerated. Don't shame your sister, she's barely holding on. I almost said yes. I could see it lit up like a window at Thanksgiving, an apology, cousins hugging me by the coat closet, my name quietly laundered and handed back. All I had to do was walk back into the dark and bring the machine with me. What stopped me was a blurry photo of a receipt marked paid. My mother didn't need me to carry her anymore. She'd carried something herself, at 65, for the first time, and it cost her a kitchen island, and she did it anyway. If I took the machine back, I'd be erasing that woman too. No, Mom, I said, level and unhurried. I won't come back as your accountant. I'll come back as your daughter, that's the only position I'm applying for. The fiduciary manages your money now. Every number stays in the light. The summary stays up, because it was never about shame. It's arithmetic. She pulled her hand back. You'd let strangers see our business. Strangers already carried your business for 6 years, Mom. You just called her cold while she did it. She stood to leave, and headlights swung into the driveway, my sister, coat open, already at full volume. Whatever deal she made you, then she saw our mother's face and read it instantly. There was no deal. Her voice cracked, the real kind, not the practiced one. Do you know what it costs to be the one everyone's proud of? She got to be the smart one. All I ever had was the show, the flowers, the parties, being the daughter people clapped for. And the show is expensive. For 1 second I saw her at 7, mid-recital, waiting for applause, and something in my chest softened. We'd both been paying for the same house of appearances, me in money and silence, her in interest and terror. Then she turned to our mother and spent everything she had left. Sign the papers, Mom. You owe me the show. Nobody answered her. My mother looked at her younger daughter like a page of figures she was finally reading all the way through. Then she climbed my porch steps, held out her hand, palm up. That woman. The fiduciary. Give me her card. I'd had it in my pocket all evening. I placed it in her open hand, and her fingers closed around it, the loudest sound of the entire night. No slammed doors, no speeches. A 65-year-old widow taking her own life back into her own hands. Mom, Jessica started. Our mother looked back over her shoulder, tired and certain. Go home to your husband. We'll talk when there's no audience. Audience. Her word, chosen herself, on my porch, in the cold. By mid-December, my family's ledger looked different. My mother signed with the fiduciary the week after Thanksgiving. I covered the setup fee, the best money out of the whole $116,000. Her taxes run on auto-pay from her own account now, where they always should have been. The home equity application went through the shredder, her idea, nobody else's. My sister didn't collapse dramatically. She gave up the studio lease and took a salaried coordinator job at a hotel, where she's genuinely gifted at running other people's parties when someone else owns the budget. The club worked out a payment plan for the balance. We speak in short, civil sentences at family gatherings now. There was no staged apology, and I've stopped shopping for one. Thanksgiving happened at my aunt's, smaller and better than any ballroom. I brought a pecan pie and no laptop. My uncle boomed about how he'd always said I was the reliable one, and nobody corrected him, because loudspeakers don't take corrections. My mother goes to pottery class on Tuesday nights now. She cashed that gift table check from a night that never got paid for, and made me 3 lopsided bowls that sit on my desk where clients can see them. My mom made those, I tell them, and I hear how the sentence sounds like bragging. The family didn't transform overnight. Families rarely do. But the bills tell the truth now, every month, in daylight, and it turns out that's what I'd been buying all along. One Saturday before Christmas, my mother's car pulled into my driveway unannounced, 2 coffees from the drive-thru balanced in her hands, bought with her own card, from her own budget. I don't know why that detail made my eyes sting before she even reached the porch. Tucked under her arm was a small card, a cardinal on the front. Inside, nothing long, nothing relitigated, just one line, in the same slanted handwriting that pays the county now, you did it right. I keep that card in the drawer where I used to hide 6 years of her unpaid bills. It's never once asked me for money. These days I get 1 phone call a week from my mother, and coffee most Saturdays. 53 calls, once, in one terrible night. 1 call a week, now. It's enough. It's real. And nobody's paying for it but her. Here's what 6 years and $116,000 taught me. Being needed isn't the same as being loved. And the people who only see you when you're useful will finally, truly see you the day you stop. That's my story. 1 email. 53 calls. A navy binder on a porch bench. A Christmas card that finally said I did it right. If you're the quiet one holding your whole family together, take this as your sign. Love you have to purchase isn't love, it's rent. And you're allowed to stop paying it.